Okay. Recording? Yes. Okay, welcome everybody to our statewide staff meeting on Stage 6, Beginners in Continuous Speaking Skills. If you don't know me, my name is Victoria Hay and I am a language officer with the Languages and Culture team at the Department of Education. We'll share a recording of this session and the slide deck afterwards, so you can just listen today. As we commence our session, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we're meeting today, pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend my respects to any Aboriginal people who may be joining us. I'm delivering from the lands of the Wallamadigal clan in Ryde, and this photo is taken at a park near my home where I often walk and enjoy the calm that it provides. Please excuse me, I'm actually just going to turn off my camera.
Can everyone please mute the microphones before we can continue?
Thank you.
There is some feedback coming through. Thank you.
Today's presentation addresses Standard 2, specifically Standard 2.1.2, and Standard 5, specifically 5.1.2. I will start the session by presenting some information on how to develop speaking skills for beginners and continuous students with a range of ideas and activities for the classroom. When developing speaking skills in Stage 6 beginners and continuous, it is essential students are working towards achieving the relevant outcomes for this skill. All teaching strategies, activities and assessments must be designed to meet these outcomes. I'll just give you a moment to read them as a reminder. When developing students' speaking skills, choose a variety of activities and strategies that will suit both HSC style and non-HSC style assessments, both of which we're going to look at in detail later. Here are some examples. Pair work, practice with each other, with you, another teacher, target language speakers, for example, using apps like italki. Students should practice the role of the interviewer too, to build their understanding of question sequencing. Provide lists of typical questions in topics. Students prepare answers to these using challenging structures in writing and audio files. Do this regularly as students will be learning new grammar structures and vocabulary that can be used in previous topics to enhance responses. Brainstorm questions with students, including the unexpected, or ask students to write questions based on responses provided. As a class, actively listen to samples of past student performance. Ask students, what would you have said? Or what question will be asked next? Actively listen to top band performers and discuss what makes this student a top performer. Online practice of exams with you, such as through Zoom or Teams, because it puts the pressure on. Encourage students to have a specific vocabulary book where they consistently write new words, phrases and expressions as they learn them, writing the word in a sentence. Flashcards of questions, real and virtual. Ask students to bring them to class and ask each other. Students create videos, blogs to share, for example, using Flip, Padlet, Movie Maker. Celebrity Head. One student has to guess the secret identity assigned to them by asking questions about themselves and the student's answer. Guess Who style games. Speed dating style format with quick fire and timed question and answers. And these ideas are based on the work of Gianfranco Conti. Mini whiteboards. Students whisper a question along the line. The last student writes it on the whiteboard, then answers it. One student writes a response on the board. The other students write a possible question for that response on their mini whiteboard. Then ask their partner that question, requiring a different response. Answer for a friend. Work in pairs. One student writes their own response to a list of questions. Their partner then pretends to be them and answers the question for them. Students compare the oral and written answer each time. And race against the clock. Students translate a list of sentences with the teacher or a classmate timing them and correcting them when they make an error. Do it several times from the beginning, improving time and accuracy each time. Pyramid translation. Play in threes. One player is referee and knows the accurate translation of the pyramid sentences. The other two take it in turns to say sentences from the top. If they make an error, the other student gets a turn.
Ms. Vicky?
Ms. Vicky.
Sentence builders. Students write a sentence from a sentence builder for a given topic or topics, and they go around the room reading their sentence to 5 different students one by one. Each of the students must ask you a question that has that answer. This allows students to consider different questions examiners may ask. Here's a summary of the ideas I've just presented, which you can share with your students. If these ideas look familiar, it's because we shared this infographic in our statewide staff room when we advertised this event. I'm now going to give you a few minutes to share with colleagues your ideas for strategies and activities to develop speaking skills. These ideas I presented are just my ideas. Please scan the QR code on the slide or in the URL that Karina's going to put in the chat for us.
It's in there now, Victoria.
Oh, great, thank you very much. So if you wouldn't mind putting in any ideas that you have, that would be fabulous. Oral ping pong, 2 truths, 1 lie, speed dating, great. Yes, opportunities to attend speaking days or that are more formal sort of things through perhaps your specific language organisations, or ones that you arrange with other schools. I've heard of that as well. Local schools that teach your language in stage 6. Whispers. Some really great ideas here. Yep. And we can share these ideas with you as well. Yeah, great. Speed dating and then using it to get them to answer in a more complex way. And I think activities like that, where you have an activity and then you try to present it to students so that they can do things in more complex ways, is fantastic. Just adapting activities in that way. Yep, great. Yep. One I saw there, that regular sort of practice too, that's just embedded in your timetable, that you always do speaking at this time, the students get used to it. Fantastic. Wow, you've got great ideas. Great idea, yes, having a collaborative drive document to build up responses, because I think students can get really used to or locked into their own questions, and if they can see questions that other students have thought of and answers that other students have thought of. Fantastic, thank you so much. Are we back onto my PowerPoint, Karina?
Yes, you are.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. It's obviously everybody's got such fabulous ideas, and I'm going to have a look at them later and share them, compile them and share them with you as well. It's just great to be able to draw on, other people's experience of what they're doing in their class. Now that we've looked at ways of developing student speaking skills, the next section of the presentation will be about designing assessment tasks to meet the requirements of the beginners and continuous courses, starting with non-HSC style tasks. NESA's requirement for Stage 6 assessment demand that school-based assessments not mimic the structure and style of HSC examinations, and provide opportunities to gather evidence about student achievement of syllabus outcomes in different ways to the HSC examination. As teachers of the beginners and continuous courses, you will know the assessment requirements for the preliminary HSC courses. Please take a moment to read them. So, we need to design non-HSC style tasks that assess the 4 macro skills in the 3-task model. An approach to designing tasks that assesses multiple macro skills in a 3-task model is to create interrelated tasks rather than only the conventional independent style task. What do I mean by independent and interrelated tasks? In an independent task, each macro skill is assessed independently. This style of assessment can be used in addition to the one formal exam allowed, but tasks of this nature should limit topics assessed and not mirror the HSC. In an interrelated task, overlapping macro skills are assessed as content and understanding of the receptive component is required to fulfill the productive component. Okay, this is an example of a non-HSC style independent task for beginners Indonesian. It only assesses one macro skill, speaking. It focuses on limited topics, family life, people, recreations and holidays, and it doesn't mirror the HSC. This is part A, so please just read through it. And this is part B. Please also take a moment to read through this. And I've actually done this task with my class, so it's tried and tested, but I did it in Japanese. Here are the marking guidelines for part A of this task. Here are the marking guidelines for part B. Here is an example of a non-HSC style interrelated task for French continuers. It assesses 2 overlapping macro skills as content of understanding and the receptive component. An advertisement in French is required to fulfill the reading and responding and speaking components of the task. So interrelated task. Please take a moment to read it. And this is part B. Please take a moment to read it again. Here are the marking guidelines for the speaking component of this task. Here is another example of a non-HSC style interrelated task. This task is for Japanese continuous. It assesses two overlapping macro skills. Its content and understanding of the receptive component, in this case, a podcast in Japanese, is required to fulfill the speaking component of the task. This is the listening component. And this is the speaking component. Marking guidelines for the speaking component of this task. Please take some time to read. Marina, did Care just have a question then? It's just about
There
the
is a
outcome.
question there at the
Yeah.
minute. Do you need to include outcomes in the task and the notification? You certainly do in the notification.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. And I mean, even better, this is if you actually write the outcomes on the, rather than just referring to them by number. Sorry, back to the speaking component of the task, marking guidelines. And one of the things I know, showing you marking guidelines, it's a little bit difficult to read them on the screen, but I want you just to make sure you're aware that often I think teachers just sometimes rely on the marking guidelines that NESA provide for their, obviously for their HSC style, for example, for oral. And we need to make sure that we're making the marking guidelines very specific to the task so that, you know, students know exactly what they have to do and how they have performed and why. Which leads me to sample feedback. When marking assessment tasks, you should provide meaningful feedback to show areas of strength and areas for improvement. Here's an example of a feedback sheet for the task we just looked at. Often teachers, myself included,
Victoria, I'm really sorry, accidentally I opened the rooms. Look what I did.
Are we all hearing okay?
No, I opened the rooms accidentally.
I'll just close the room and put a broadcast. Sorry
Yeah,
about that, people.
I'm going to close. I'm going to close and bring everyone back.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We're all coming back to the main room. Don't panic. We just like to take
Okay.
people on a little detour during
Yes,
our
we like-
sessions.
okay.
We like to have short trips. I'm really sorry, everyone. It was my mistake.
Oh,
Mea culpa.
Okay. Bit
all
freaked
good.
out.
We thought we did
thought it
something
was
wrong.
just, we just had to keep you on your toes. It's so good.
Victoria, are you back?
Yes,
I'm
we're all
back. Yeah,
back.
I'm just.
I am
I'm-
so sorry.
I think everyone's
trying-
back but our presenter.
No,
Okay,
she's
Poor
I'm
here.
Victoria.
are you just trying to give me a mild heart attack there?
I am really
it's-
sorry. I'm not.
That's
It's
all right.
initiation for your first session,
I saw
Victoria.
that message come up and I thought, oh, okay, no, that's not going to happen.
Why
Doesn't
am I going
matter.
to that room? Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
So we're back now. Can everybody see
Yes.
that slide?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Feedback
Sample
slide.
feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I was saying is that I was just in the middle of saying, I know I definitely, absolutely provide corrections on every error that the students make. You know, if we've done a speaking assessment, record it, listen to it, and correct every error they've made. Do they look at it? And I don't know whether they do or not. And I think that, you know, it's, of course, if students are looking at that and then using that to improve future performance, absolutely valuable. But if they're not, what can we be doing to provide more, you know, valuable feedback to them? And that's something that I love to have other people's ideas about. So does anybody actually have any ideas about other ways? This is a ideal, you know, I know that time can be a factor and we don't often have time to be, you know, giving very detailed feedback to students as well. But I think if we do set it out this way, it can be helpful: strengths, areas for improvement, and then specific feedback where you can put those corrections. But if you're looking to how they can actually improve moving forward, I think it's really good for them to have general statements about areas for improvement. So does anybody just in the chat, or if you'd like to just unmute and just tell me any great ideas, because I'd love to hear what you've got to say about how you give students feedback in stage 6.
Can I just add something?
Sure, please.
I
Ken.
find, like with most students, I do make corrections for them, and I spend a lot of time doing it. And because I do that, I ask my students every time we have a speaking practice, which is regularly, what 3 things they're going to try to eliminate all their mistakes on for the next time. And then we slowly go through that and we start to reduce the number of mistakes they're making. I think just giving them feedback and saying go and fix it is not effective.
Yeah.
But the major things, you know, you need to correct these 3 things next time and concentrate on correcting that. And before you actually do the next speaking practice with them, if you say, you just remind them, well, tell me again, what 3 things are you going to try and fix this time?
Yeah.
And I find that they actually do that, and it is helpful.
And Ken, are they specific things like this grammar structure,
It
this
is
intonation?
when I do this, when I mark my 11s and 12s for speaking, I have a kind of a table, what they say, and I write their mistake down word perfect, and then what they should say. And so they can see where they've made the mistake. And it takes takes about 40 minutes per 10-minute conversation. So it's quite an investment in time.
Yes. Yeah.
But then you have a copy of what their mistakes are.
Yeah.
And so you can talk to them at the time when you're giving when you sit down. Because one-on-one speaking practice, you also gives them a chance to kind of ask questions and things like that. Yeah. And you can kind of keep track of it.
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Because asking them to, you know, if they made 10 mistakes, asking them to fix all 10 mistakes the next time you talk
Exactly.
to them,
Yeah.
it's
not
too
realistic.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. And it's very, you know, can have a negative sort of, these are all the mistakes I've made. It's focusing to when you correct like that on all the negatives. Yeah. Thank you, Ken. Does anybody else have a great strategy for giving feedback for stage 6 speaking?
There's a couple in the chat too, Victoria.
Sure, Karina. Could you tell us what they are?
Bai said, just an idea, if it's recorded, it might be useful to write down the times where the students have made a mistake. Then the first part of the feedback could be a list of the times where they need to try and work out their own errors first. And Maria, individual Google Doc to students with corrections, very similar to your feedback template. Also, the approach used in preparation is feed up. Feedback when the assessment task is completed and marked, feed forward, how to improve going forward in their next speaking lesson. And
Right.
Brittany has just also added, she's not in a senior class at the moment, but feedback's easier on junior classes when the marking criteria is more detailed. It saves a lot of work when they can highlight the criteria point, pointed out and write the specifics. For example, if an assessment task has 3 outcomes, there are criteria attached to each. All great ideas.
Yes, they are really great ideas. And I love that idea of when somehow trying to find students, recording it to allow them to find their own mistakes. Fantastic way to provide feedback to students rather than us, which is what we want to do. When we hear a mistake, we want to correct it. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for your ideas. Now we're going to put you into breakout rooms to share some suggestions of other types of non-HSC style speaking tasks. So now think back to the tasks if you could. They're just a couple of ideas that I've had, but I'd love to hear your ideas because I know that you're all out there creating them all the time. So they could be independent or interrelated. We'll allow you 5 minutes in the breakout room, and we'd love just a couple of groups to come back and share if you're willing to do that. So breakout rooms will happen automatically, and when the session's over, you'll return to the main meeting. You don't need to do anything. Thanks, Evia.
Okay, it's happening now.
See you soon.
See, it takes a long time for the rooms to open. That's why I did it early.
I was talking too slowly.
Oh.
Ebony's been kicked out.
For some reason, I couldn't put Haricha in a group.
Okay,
It
and
said-
Ebony's back too.
Yeah,
That's all right. We can ask them in here.
that's right.
Aricha and Ebony?
Yep.
Do you have any ideas? You somehow haven't been put into a breakout room. Do you have any ideas for non-HSC style tasks that you might have done?
Well, to be honest, I'm just beginning my teaching in Japanese. Next year I'm going to take up full-time Japanese. So I'm maths and Japanese trained. So I'm currently teaching some year 8 classes.
Okay.
Next year it's my first HSC teaching session.
Will that be beginners then?
Yeah. So
Beginners?
Yeah, I'm with Anna right now. So she's the current Japanese teacher, which I'm taking over for next year, and this is why I'm joined
Okay.
today's
Okay, well, I hope
program.
it's
So I can
helpful.
get some ideas from you
Sure.
guys, because I am kind of rusty as I've just been doing maths for a while.
Okay. And sorry, what school are you at?
Jindabyne High School.
Jindabyne.
Yeah.
Great. I'm so happy to hear Jindabyne's got a stage 6 class next year.
Yeah. Anna's done a great job at keeping that up.
Okay. And Ebony, do you have stage 6?
No, I don't. I just
Okay.
I just came to sort of have a look.
Yeah.
We do have a beginners class next year, but I think Daniela will be taking that one.
Okay. Beginners Japanese or
Beginners French.
French? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. And we've got Milika as well.
Yeah. Militza, hi, you made it
Milita.
in. Militza, do you want me to? Oh,
Militza.
you can stay here in this room and share with us. Militza teaches Serbian, Victoria, at
Okay.
Secondary College of Languages. Yeah, she's a senior teacher.
Right. Wow.
Yeah,
So
so
do you have-
Milita, the question that we're discussing is any suggestions for non-HSC style speaking tasks? Can I share the one that you just did last week? It doesn't, I don't know why she's not
Hello.
unmuting. Hi,
Hi,
Joe.
Hi, it's Jo.
Yeah,
I think my school internet connection just died and I got taken out of the breakout room.
Oh, that's all right.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, maybe I should have stopped. Oh, it doesn't matter. Recording. That's okay. Oh, Melissa, can you unmute your microphone and tell us about the non-HSC style task that you just did?
Okay.
Yes, there it is.
Good.
Mm.
For non-HSC style HSC speaking task, I have a lot of practice in the class and on some different way. For example, we have debating, we have storytelling, retelling, a lot of conversation which we use. And a big problem is for children vocabulary. That's a big problem. This children is born here and the vocabulary is very, very pure, small, and we need work for developing vocabulary first.
Mm. Yeah, because Serbian is careful, as you know, and so it is continuous syllabus, but the students don't have that level of language.
Okay.
Yeah.
That must be challenging.
Yeah, but yeah, sorry, my sound cut off for a while. Did you mention the podcast that you got them to do? Was that last term? Yeah.
Yeah, I make podcast. I make a power presentation. They make, for example, for next for Saturday, I have an assessment task speaking, and children need to make a power presentation. They choose a topic from syllabus. This is sport and personal profile, and they will put some information and talk about that. This is prepared assessment. They need.
Melissa, is the podcast just one student, or is it an interview?
Podcast, last year, I have had podcast with students, and that was very successful. And I use podcast like practice.
Is it interview style though, or are they just talking? One student talking in the assessment?
Last year for assessment task, but this year for practice.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Joe, do you have any ideas for non-HSC style tasks that you've been doing?
Well, I like to do role plays. So I know they used to do it ages ago, but the kids seem to enjoy it. They work together with, you know, in a pair. Usually I like to get them in pairs. And I usually set the scene for them, like it might be a child who really wants to go out at night time, but the mother is very angry because the child hasn't done their homework. So I very specifically tell them what the scenario is, and they go back and they have to find time together to practice it, and then they present that in front of the class. And that usually goes quite well. They quite enjoy doing that.
Do they, is it always just independent speaking start? So when you've done speaking, have you done any interrelated speaking tasks?
So with the interrelated, do you mean, I didn't quite get that term. Do you mean with other tasks involved?
Yeah. So it means that the speaking component, if you're doing interrelated with speaking, it's got to be related to or reliant on something. So for example, you might have a listening task and
one sort of co-depends on the other one. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I don't tend to do tasks like that. I'm wondering if I should be doing tasks like that. I tend to do just the independent types of tasks.
Yeah.
Do we need to do both?
You don't need to, but it's, you know, a suggestion because for non-HSC style. Have you done our stage 6 course?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so that one has a lot of examples on interrelated and interdependent tasks. So, you know, if in your schedule you have a reading component and the writing component, for example, it gives you guidance on how you can have them as interrelated tasks or any kind of skills. So sorry, Victoria, can I close the rooms now? Is it time? Yeah. All right.
Thanks everybody for sharing.
How do I get into that course that you
I'll
mentioned?
share it with you.
I'll
Okay,
put it
thank
in
you.
the chat. I'll put the code. It's accredited as well. So I'll put it in the main chat now.
Thank you.
Someone's trying to ring me. You believe it?
Done.
I'm done.
We're back.
I did warn everyone.
Okay.
So much slower
Everyone
than.
back?
Oh.
Would anybody just like to share an idea that they shared in the breakout room? It'd be great to get an idea of an interrelated task that anybody does with speaking and something else. I know it's one that teachers struggle with, to do the interrelated sometimes.
As you're coming back, can you please make sure that you mute your mics again because they automatically stay on? Thank you.
Any brave souls?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. Hi. I don't know. We were saying in our breakout
Yes.
room for an interrelated.
Yep.
But it was more for continuers. One that I've used in the past with Italian continuers, which they really enjoyed, was it was a combined listening and then a speaking. They watched a YouTube clip. It was an interview on an Italian famous singer talking about how he got his start in music and then presenting his latest song. And then they had a couple of questions to answer while they were listening to the interview.
Yep.
And then they were given 10 minutes to them prepare. They had to pretend that they were on their own personal, they were writing a blog, and they had to convince their friends to look up this singer's latest album. And
Great.
but with continuers, it's easier to do that. Beginners, it's a lot harder because their language is so limited.
Yeah.
So we
That
were
is
kind
true,
of
but thanks,
saying,
Teresa, for that. That's true, but that is your example is an example that is really imaginative, and you really can do fantastic things just by using your imagination and coming up with tasks like that give the students, the opportunity to really show what they can do in a different context to HSC style. So it's hard, but if you use your, sometimes you've just got to use your imagination a little bit, and people come up with fantastic ideas. I know when I was working at NSL, I was like really surprised at some of the ideas, getting to hear about different things people did in different faculties. I was really impressed with the imagination. Thank you. So I hope you've got some good ideas from some of the ideas I've presented and what you shared in your room. And thank you, Teresa, for sharing as well. So we might move on. We're going to move on to look at HSC style assessment tasks for beginners and continuers now. In the HSC, the beginner's exam consists of a 5-minute conversation between the student and the examiner. Continuers exam is a 10-minute conversation between the student and the examiner. It's in the style of an interview. Students have the opportunity to demonstrate their ability to talk about a range of topics with varying degrees of depth in a conversational manner. Questions must only refer to the syllabus content in relation to topics and outcomes, and only contain questions which are clear and unambiguous. They need to be free from bias and inclusive of and accessible to all students. For beginners, an HSC style of speaking assessment will relate to the prescribed syllabus topics from the perspective of the personal world. Prescribed topics are consistent across all beginners' syllabuses. For continuers, the candidate will respond to the examiner's questions, which will relate to the prescribed syllabus topics from the perspective of the personal world. For continuous courses, the topics differ between languages. Students may be asked questions from any theme, not just the theme of the individual. For example, French continuers could be asked questions from the theme, the French-speaking communities, daily life, lifestyles, routines, arts and entertainment, or from the theme, the changing world, travel and tourism, the world of work, the young person's world, as it relates to their personal world. This is a summary of the continuous personal world topics taken from a range of continuous syllabuses. Students may be asked questions from any theme as the topics relate to their personal world. It is essential that teachers and students are thoroughly familiar with all themes and topics for their own course. Please take some time to read through this slide. When conducting an HSC style assessment, consider preparing introductory questions for each topic, preparing a range of questions covering each syllabus topic as a guide to direct the flow of the conversation. It's important to engage with a student in an interview style conversation and not just ask a series of unrelated questions. Ask questions that are open-ended and which vary in nature and difficulty. Ask questions which explore grammatical forms relevant to the syllabus so students can demonstrate a variety of tenses, vocab and grammar structures. Ask one question at a time, giving students time to gather their thoughts. Ask appropriate questions, avoid sensitive issues. Interrupt the student if they speak for too long. You are conducting and controlling the exam, not the student. Be kind, but jump in at the end of a sentence. Build upon questions based on student answers. The spiral approach, allowing students to show what they know. Keep to the time limit. Don't translate words or expressions for students. Teach them how to express in the target language that they have not understood. For example, sorry, I didn't understand the question, or can you please say that again? If they didn't understand it, repeat it once. If they still don't, rephrase or move on. Do not correct or assist students with sentence construction or vocabulary. When conducting an HSC style assessment, it's helpful to have a brief summary of the grammar and topics in front of you as the teacher, such as on this slide. Some languages actually allow this kind of summary for teachers in the HSC oral exam or for examiners, and teachers can refer to it. Sorry, somebody's just took control of the presentation. Teachers can refer to it or use it to assist them to conduct the exam. It is just a prompt and supports you to make the exam consistent for all students. Of course, it will depend on what language and level of course you are teaching. It's also useful for students to prepare this kind of checklist of their own to help them to prepare for HSC style assessments. So if you are provided with this form as an examiner, you don't write on it or anything like that. It's just to refer to, but it can be really useful as the examiner and in your case, the teacher.
There is a question there too, Victoria.
Sure.
Do students get marked down if they ask a clarification question in English during the assessment?
I don't like the term marked down, but you don't mark down when you're marking it. But yeah, I mean, students are not to use English in the exam, so it must be avoided. Yeah, just ask in the target language. If it's completely natural for students to be nervous or to not understood the question, and it's completely fine to say, I didn't understand, or can you please say that again in the target language? Avoid using English. The examiner won't respond in English. So does that answer that question?
Thank you.
So HSC style assessment questions. The marking guidelines for HSC beginners and continuous oral exams show students what students are required to do to score in the top box. In order to prepare students to converse effectively, and engage fluently and effectively in conversation for continuous, students should be able to answer simple questions and then expect and be able to answer follow-up questions on the same topic. The questions will increase in difficulty and require a more sophisticated answer. Having said that, they'll increase in difficulty through that questioning sequence, and then the examiner might go back to an easier question. So it's not going to get more difficult from the beginning to the whole end of the examination. It will be like a spiral approach. Easy to more difficult, easy to more difficult within that topic they're asking. The continuous marking guidelines specify the need for students to respond in some depth to a range of questions. So the development of this skill is important. It is good practice for students to try and answer each question with more than one sentence if they can, thus providing depth, but without producing a monologue type response. To assist students to provide depth in their responses, it can be helpful to teach them to provide a description and an action and reflection in their responses. Obviously, some questions will lend themselves to one or more type of these responses, but by categorising their responses in this way, it can really help students develop their skills. The right-hand side of the screen has examples of these different kinds of responses. I'll just let you read through them. And you could combine these into one response if you like as a student, but yeah, please be careful not to make the response resemble a monologue. It's a conversation. Here is a sample question sequence that's appropriate for both beginners and continuers. You can see which outcomes each question addresses. I'll just let you read that. Some languages progress to a more difficult level of language capability than others in stage 6. For those languages, here's an example of how the same questioning might progress for the continuous course. Some example responses and what outcomes are addressed. You can see that the more challenging questions address the more challenging outcomes, those being 1.3, exchanges and justifies opinions and ideas, and 1.4, reflects on aspects of past, present, and future experience. Here is another example of a question sequence for the continuous topic of school life, possible responses and the outcomes addressed. As seen in the last sample, the last question sequence on the previous slide, continuous students may be required to answer questions from another perspective based on a response they've already given. Here is another example. Question: do you have your driver's license? Response: yes, I got my driver's license in July and bought my own car. Question: what do your parents think of your driving before you've left school? Response: my parents know I'm responsible and they're happy I worked in order to save money to buy a car. Teachers should ask students questions using grammatical structures and topics from the syllabus that will give them the opportunity to demonstrate what they know. Here are some example questions in the topic of leisure. These will, of course, depend on the topics and grammatical structures in the syllabus that you teach. Here are some more examples. Please note that asking questions from another perspective will only be asked in a continuous course. When conducting an HSC style assessment, start with an easy first question, such as these. And these may differ between languages. For example, Arabic students would not be asked a first question about family because it's sensitive, and Japanese students would not be asked describe or tell me about something. Asking open-ended questions in HSC style assessment allows the student to demonstrate their skills and knowledge according to the outcomes. It's natural to respond to a yes/no question with just yes or no, especially when you're nervous as a student. Here is an example of how asking an open-ended question can elicit a better response from the student. Of course, at the start of the assessment or when changing topics, it can be natural to ask a non-open-ended question, and that's fine.
We have another question there too,
Sure.
Victoria.
Yep.
Why wouldn't students be asked to describe something as the first question for Japanese, and they are not a Japanese teacher, they're just curious?
Oh, we always ask a direct question. In Japanese, you're never going to say, tell me about, or tell me a bit about, or describe. It's just not. I've been examining HSC continuers and beginners for many years, and we're directed that we have to ask a direct question. But I know that that's not the case. And so putting together this presentation, obviously I'm a Japanese teacher, consulting so that it applies to all language teachers as much as possible. I found out that in other languages you are able to ask those questions. And it is very, I mean, I know that it's very difficult when you haven't actually examined the HSC to know how it's done. So that's why hopefully this information is helpful for you to know how it's actually done in the HSC as best I can. A strategy that you can teach students is to guide the interviewer when answering questions. This can be done by leaving a hook in your response that will lead the interviewer to the next obvious question. For example, do you have a part-time job? Yes, I work at Kmart, but it's not that interesting. I'd like to find a new job. An obvious next question would be, where would you like to work instead? And the student may answer, I would like to work at the after-school care at the primary school I went to. I'd like to become a primary school teacher in the future. Next obvious question, why would you want to become a primary school teacher? And of course, you don't know what the examiner is going to ask. They might ask a different question, but it is a very good skill for students to do, to leave that hook in a response, and then you're very likely, and it's very common for you to get that next question that you were looking for. Looking at the feedback provided by NESA for their oral exams each year is really helpful. It's specific to each language and allows students to see what they should be doing, as shown on this slide for the 2020 Japanese Continuous Oral Exam. Jindy, do you have a question? Your hand was up.
You're muted, Benedict.
It's Jindy with her hand up. Are you trying to speak to?
It's Benedict logged in as Jindy.
Ah, okay, gotcha. Are you trying to ask a question? I can see your face. If not, we'll go.
Type it in the chat if you can, and we'll get to it at the end.
Yeah. This slide's an example of what students were able to do in better responses. Again, really useful. You look at your language and if you look at the feedback that Nessa provides, it's very helpful. And this one is where students can improve. Consider providing what better responses included and areas for students to improve to your students as a kind of a checklist to ensure that they're confident with these structures. And this feedback is across all skill areas. It's very, very helpful on the Nessa website. Okay, that actually concludes the presentation. And here's some information about the relevant support available for the topic of this presentation. On our website, we have sample speaking questions for continuers and beginners languages organised by topics, advice documents for continuers and beginners students, and a resource to assist students to develop a notice of assessment. On the Nessa website, you'll also find support documents, including school-based assessment requirements for Stage 6, the relevant syllabus document, HSC past papers, and oral exam, oral exam feedback for each course from past years, as I just talked about. We're just going to stop the recording now, please, Evia.